As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
One of the worst performances of my career, and they never doubted it for a second.
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength, makes us noble.
You just gotta keep living, man. Livin.
Son of a bitch. He stole my life.
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
Welcome back to the Shot by Shot podcast, where we break down and analyse modern films, old films, foreign films. We cover it all pretty much, and today we're exploring one of the most extremely underrated releases from 2024, The Beast by French filmmaker Bertrand Bonello, which is without a doubt one of the most unique releases of the year, being part romance, part thriller, part period piece. But it's one that went extremely under the radar with a limited release in theatres at the start of the year. It's sitting at 3.7 with 60k logs on Letterboxd right now, and a pretty huge disparity between critics and audiences on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's undoubtedly a pretty polarizing film of the year, as it's not one that really, it does not hold your hand. It's got a non-linear structure. It throws you in there and it leaves you with a lot of questions that aren't always answered, which will certainly put some people off. But I think it's one that it works because of that, and it really wears its influences of directors like Lynch on its sleeve. Is really effective, but it's also one that makes you think a lot after it's finished, and it's definitely better on rewatches. One of the best of the year. I think Bertrand Bonello's produced one of the most thematically interesting films about AI, humanity, art. It couldn't have come out at a better time, and it's such an interesting movie. But yeah, we're gonna break that down today, but we're gonna give some spoiler-free reviews first. So we're bringing Evan back on, which he's been on a tons of time here, so I don't think he really needs an introduction anymore. But would you like to tell us your spoiler-free review first of what you thought of The Beast?
I tried to watch this movie a couple months ago, and like I work in a bakery, so I'm up really early, and I fell asleep watching it. But it wasn't because I disliked it; I was just tired. So I don't know what it was. I was looking for something a bit more crazy last week, and decided to watch it, and it blew me away. It's so much to take in on one watch, and like even on repeat watches, like I've got my notes app in my phone is just like quotes and shit that I'm like trying to think about. And the Leia Sadu is amazing. George Mackey is great. It's visually stunning, super trippy. Lot to dive into it, but it's amazing. I give it a 5-star. Top 3 of the year for sure. I think it's amazing. It asks a lot of interesting questions, and I'm excited to talk about it more.
Yeah, for me, I feel the same way. I'm so happy I got to see this film in cinemas, because I think it's really worth it. It's a film that requires a lot of patience, but I think the payoff is really, really incredible. I was just so fascinated by everything that Bertrand Bonello has to offer. I don't think any of you guys have seen any of his other films, but one of his other films, The House of Tolerance, which I think is absolutely fantastic, another really, really underrated film. And then he made another film called Nocturama as well, which is kind of this political film on terrorism in France, which is quite a hot topic. But yeah, this film is just everything I love. Like Ryan said, it doesn't try to hold your hand at all, and I was so unbelievably excited. And then when I saw it, I was just completely blown away. It's just this story that spans centuries and is completely fascinating, and seeing the reactions from other people is quite hilarious, to be honest. Still only, like you said, only 63k logs on Letterboxd, which is really sad. 2 of my favorite performances of the year as well. I love Lea Seydoux, and this film, obviously it's going to pick up nothing at awards season at all, just because it's rollout and I guess it's nature. But I think it has the most. The film as a whole is really underappreciated. But I think the score is one of the best of the year as well. But we'll get into that. And it's such a whirlwind. It's romance, sci-fi, it's horror the next, and I think it's also one of the scariest films of the decade as well. Every time it really does get me, but it's just completely revolutionary, and Bonello is a really incredible director.
Yeah, he's definitely interesting just off this one. I know he's kind of thrown in with like the new French extremity movement, with because like you said, he kind of focuses on taboo subjects with his other films. But I think I'm pretty sure this is his first venture into science fiction, like thriller kind of movies. So I think it's probably pretty different to the other stuff. Yeah, if you've not seen it, definitely check out. It's on Criterion Channel and Mubi if you're in the UK. I think it's too late to get it in theaters.
It actually got a physical release.
I want to order that so bad.
Yeah, but we're gonna go into spoilers now, I think. Break down the rest of the movie. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, go watch it first before you watch the rest of the podcast. But yeah, like we were saying, it's pretty distinct in its structure. It's like split into 3 main sections, which are very confusing at first. It's not really until the end of the film where it kind of like all connects and wraps up in your mind, which is what makes it kind of a challenging watch at first. Like they're all intersecting at different points, and it's kind of confusing at times. But I think it would be easier for us maybe to break down each section rather than jumping about, because it'd maybe get a bit confusing.
I agree.
So we have 3 sections. So one of them's France, and it's 1910, which is like, I looked it up as well. It's like actually realistic to a period where France was underwater for 2 months due to severe flooding.
Yeah, we get the kind of those like glimpses of like black and white images from the time, which I think obviously tell it was.
And then we also jump later on into Los Angeles 2014, and then the other section is modern day in the film, so it's set in 2044, which is just this like very dystopian, like AI controlled world. But we jump in between like all these worlds throughout the film. But I think we should start with France, maybe, which is maybe my, if I had to rank, that would probably be my least favorite section of the movie. It starts out, it's like this beautiful period piece set in France at the beginning of the 20th century, and Gabrielle, played by Léa Seydoux, she's a pianist and unhappily married when she meets Louis at a fancy party at the start. It's like they play the same characters but like different periods in time, which is really interesting. Yeah, this section's just really distinct in the way that it's the only part that's shot in 35mm film, which is the other 2 sections are shot digitally, so they really stand out. Like all 3 stand out completely between each other. But yeah, and I'm interested to hear what you kind of thought about that's early France section.
There's just one thing I want to touch on. The very opening scene of the film. Without that I think is just, without that we get that couple minutes scene with like the green screen, and then if that's not there, then I think this film, I think right away it sets like the tone, like this slightly off strange tone. I think without that, then I think that whole kind of first period is just, it plays differently. I just wanted to say that because I think that opening scene is just so important to how the rest of the film plays out. It's like a couple minute scene, but it just sets the stage for like, something is off, and it's strange about where it is. Because if not, then you're just being thrown into straight thrown into 1900s France, and it's interesting. But yeah, the
and
first section is
part of the LA section as well, the green screen part, which we find out later on. But yeah, the France bit lasts like 40 minutes, so it really is quite a challenging section where you don't really know where it's going.
Yeah,
it's like I said, I think it's the section that requires the most patience, because you're in kind of this unknown, and I think it's fascinating. This section, I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure they're both Paris, aren't they? The 2044 and the 1900s.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I thought so. I like the way that Bonello kind of captures this time, especially the opening party. We kind of open with this really nice long tracking shot just through this party, just wandering through kind of conversations. And I think the way the film slips between English and French is really good as well. George McKay, obviously, freshening up his French for this, which is very impressive. And it's just these little bits, and kind of this opening bit, the little bits of dialogue that are just are strange. We get introduced to this kind of concept of the beast, and George McKay kind of starts asking in this opening party, I was like, about this mysterious thing, and we have no idea what it is. And as kind of ideas develop, we start to think, oh, maybe it's to do with the floods, and then or some form of natural disaster. But there's so much mystery to it, and I think the score plays such a brilliant part. The score, by the way, is composed by Bonello. He composes the entirety of the score for this, and I'm pretty sure he does that for a lot of his other films. Is absolutely fantastic. It's has such a sci-fi feel to it, and it's put in like every now and again. It's not used like a lot, but it just adds this like instant sense of mystery to every scene, and I think it's used, I think, where they're having like I think it's used briefly at the end of that party stage, but when they're having like tea or something, like afternoon tea or something together, it's used, and it's absolutely fantastic. But I think the main setting stage for this is the idea of the dolls, which is where this first part of the 1900s ends. The dolls is an interesting concept because it's the idea reflecting from the kind of 2044 about everyone's becoming emotionless, and we're tracking through our past lives to try and purify our emotions, and the AI there just wants to cleanse everybody of human emotion, and that's, I guess, the whole idea of the film. My perception of what the beast is the fear of becoming emotionless and not loving, being able to love anybody anymore, which spoiler alert is exactly what happens at the end of the film. And we see Gabrielle, she has like this really deadpan look to her like a lot of the time, and that's kind of reflected in the doll's face when she's talking about, I think she says, I have loads of quotes written down as well, let me see. And then George McKay is kind of asking in that scene, like, how do you create its face and its expression? And she says, just no emotion, so it pleases everybody. And that's just instantly, there's kind of this link to the 2044, because that's almost exactly what's happening in that time. And I think it's this idea that it was deep rooted all along exactly what was going to happen at the end of the film, and I think the dolls reflect that really well. As I'll touch on a bit more later, but we see a more animated doll in LA that she has as well. But yeah, I think this first section is it's slowest in pacing, and I think it definitely will lose a lot of people, but I think that I do think it's fantastic, and I think its use of classical music across the film, the song choices and the titles and the lyrics of the songs are absolutely perfect in this film, the soundtrack. But yeah, really great first opening section for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's an interesting start because it's pretty slow, but it like you get the posh party and, oh, I'm a big fan of yours and things like that, and it's pretty natural. But like, yeah, like you said, Oscar, where if you don't have that opening scene where you know something's off, you're just going along with it. But it instantly starts planting ideas in your head about emotion and just kind of like laying the groundwork and the seeds. And they have this one conversation where she's talking about the terrible feel. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's like they kind of like split the conversation. Like the scene cuts. It's the like first time they're really talking, and it poses, she's talking about this horrible feeling. She's talking about just like this uneasy feeling in her life, and then it cuts to like present day for a little bit, and then it goes back to that conversation. So I love how it just slowly starts to ask the questions that the movie is trying to, it's the groundwork for all of these tough scenes and crazy overwhelming emotions that it's trying to bring out in you about human nature. So I really love that. I love the doll factory scene. The one scene that really hits for me is when he's asking her about whether like she loves him, and she's like, because you think I love you, and he asks to hold her hand, and it's this really long shot, a couple minutes long, of them just holding hands, and it's this immense like relief in Leia Seydoux's eyes. And on rewatch for me, it hit even harder because it's like she's going through, because she's kind of just going along with it at the start to see what this purification thing is all about. And it's one of those moments where you realize how important the connection is to her. And it's this such a romantic, like sensual almost human connection. And I love the way this film portrays connection. So yeah, I'm sure I'll have more to say. It's a tough movie to talk about because there's just a lot and it bounces around so much. But the scene when they're trying to escape the doll factory it's an interesting one. It's like really tense, but also like when they're just floating there, it's kind of like this peaceful moment too. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is like the kind of hardest to break down and like see what it's about, because I mean, I think it has the most maybe dialogue or conversations of the film. And I completely agree that the green screen at the start is like necessary for this to really work with the conversations they're having, because they have like all these conversations about art and like discussing music without sentiment, and it becomes very cold. I feel like that's like kind of going into the AI kind of sections of the film, which although that part hasn't been really introduced yet, but like talking about like how like AI art doesn't have like the same emotion and stuff as like a human making it, which is very relevant today. The kind of way I seen this, or the factory with like the dolls and stuff, I feel like there was a lot of focus, all the people putting like craft and like real practical work into making it. I don't know if I'm stretching here, but it felt like it was like this is like what filmmaking used to be like with like putting so much like craft and work into it, compared to like the digitalness of the green screen at the start, which is really conflicted between the two. I really like that, like the like subtext of like filmmaking and art like plays throughout the whole film. It started making me think of like how does Herzog like look at like modern films now, where like all the stuff that he had to do in his films and people are just doing it in front of green screens now and faking it compared to what he had to do. But yeah, this is probably the part I definitely struggled with this part the most on first watch, but it did start to click a whole lot more on rewatch. I do really like the doomed reality of their relationship that happens in like the end of every storyline. Like it's kind of like the Everything Everywhere All at Once, where like they like find each other in like every universe, but like they always end up dying. So yeah, I really like that part of their relationship. But yeah, definitely the hardest to kind of talk about that section.
I really love when it's like she's partway through her purification and they're like, oh, we're just going to do a test to see what your progress is like. And it's like, we're going to show you an image. And you don't see what the picture they're showing her is, but it just super slow zoom onto Leia City's face.
And nice she blinks. The eyes.
Yeah, she blinks and the tears immediately start pouring out. And it's not till you see them drown that you realize that's what they saw. Like, because it cuts, as soon as they drown, it cuts right back to her eyes. And you're like, oh shit. Like, it just, the way it connects all these stories is so fucking cool. And like, you brought up the like sentiment thing. And there's a quote I have here, like, sentiment is the beginning of emotion, is one of the quotes where they tried to paint this, like the AI people, you know, whatever, they try to paint this world where, oh, you can just be kind of neutral, you know, you can feel a little, but you're not going to feel anything extreme. But like music and art and all this, it's like rooted in emotion because somebody was inspired to create that at some point. And we'll get to it later, but the like karaoke scenes when she's watching on TV in 2014, and it's all like kind of bad singing and it's kind of goofy, but she's crying every single time she watches them. It's just like, I love that kind of was, you know, that seed was planted in the first like 15 minutes of the movie. It's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I love how this film plays on the saying that you feel most alive when closest to death. I think that is loosely said in this film. I think she says that I feel scared and I feel alive when they're having that conversation, kind of the doll bit. But in this kind of opening thing, we get introduced to one of the biggest motifs of the film with pigeon, way staple part of this country. But yeah, this pigeon, we are told, represents the Holy Spirit. I'm pretty sure that's what we're told is described as, and we see it through many scenes in this film, especially when kind of the weirder stuff is happening. There's kind of a scene where we get later on where a pigeon dies, and then obviously in the final scene, the pigeon flies away, just as she collapses onto her knees. And it's such a weird animal choice to have a pigeon, but he's just always there and he's always lurking.
Pigeon always reminded me of the start as well, when she was like pretending for something to be up there, when she was looking up at the sky. I was kind of imagined those two as like being connected.
And with the dolls, I like what you said about the filmmaking, but I think it's almost like a reflection of the start of androids and AI. Where that's where kind of they started, is the idea of them making dolls and then making them more realistic. And in 2014 it becomes like animated and robotic, and then in 2044 it's actual humans. And a lot of the time the kind of the fear of the beast is she just says she can't express it in words. And then we get that scene you're talking about between those two in the doll factory, and he says, "What is stronger, your fear or your love for me?" And I think that's one of the standout quotes of the film. But yeah, that kind of opening segment, even though it's kind of split up when she's kind of going back and forth, I think is brilliant. One other thing I haven't talked about yet, the aspect ratio choices in this film are absolutely fantastic. We get a wider screen for when it's in kind of this dream reality and it's free, and we get this tighter, I think it's 4:3 for when they're in actual reality. Just like a little storytelling nod to how kind of less free the actual reality is compared to the dream sequences. But yeah, really nice use of aspect ratio here. I do very much appreciate good aspect ratio changes, and this is definitely one of them.
Yeah, he definitely uses the technology well to also tell a story. And straight after, when they die, he abandons shooting on film and he goes to digital, and we go to the 2014 in Los Angeles. And it's a big change compared to the first half of the film. We did see it at the start, like we were saying, in front of the green screen, but we're now starting to find out more about that. And we're going to this luxurious mansion where her in a different life is staying there, house sitting, and this is all shot digitally. There's even some scenes shot on an iPhone 11 for when we go to the George McKay character. And I like the quote. Well, we go back to the green screen at one point, and I like the quote, and it's, "Can you imagine this happening to you? Can you react as if the beast is coming for you?" I feel like that really plays into the whole just imagining in front of a green screen. Like, that's really relevant to kind of modern filmmaking,
You'd be
especially
scared to see what you can't see.
Yeah, they're basically just acting in front of green screens and pretending that stuff is there. It's not like with practical filmmaking where they're doing it for real most of the time. Yeah, and then the director even tells her when he's explaining the scene, because she's doing I think it's a phone commercial. But yeah, she's in front of a green screen, and he says, "You're walking with the sun. Don't worry, we'll add him in post." And that's, I guess, the line in the whole movie. But yeah, it feels like a big part of like what the film's exploring, like just all the AI and advancements and technologies and emotion and passion just taking away from like filmmaking or art. It's such a great opening, and just all those green screen scenes really pop because it's, again, the close-ups of Lea Seydoux are so good in those moments. But yeah, we go to LA. What did you think about this whole section?
This is like the section, I think, for a lot of people that kind of reignited this film. Is absolutely fantastic. It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. George McKay plays an absolute incel of a character. It's some really nice found footage sequences. His character in this section was actually inspired by a real life killer who used to document like his things on YouTube as well. And that's
why it's set in 2014, because that's when he actually done it. It was Elliot Roger, the guy that would vlog and do it.
And he's just this guy who just blames women for all his problems. You get that hilarious intro of him, and I think the range of his character and Lea Seydoux the act is just absolutely fantastic. They're playing completely different characters in all three sections of this film, and each of them do it brilliantly, and they manage to kind of translate the kind of emotions and meanings from each character, each version of their character really, really well. And also, I've just seen that some of this film was shot in LA just without permission. They just couldn't be bothered. And they did it and they shot sequences just without permission to shoot. Which I think is hilarious. And then we get that thing where he's on the car just sitting on the beach, is like, oh, my nice time has been ruined by this couple that
So funny.
And he's like, I have to show the world why life isn't fair. And he's just reminiscing of being a child again. And we get this this song that starts playing, "You Belong to Me." Obviously, the title, fantastic choice. The song is absolutely fantastic as well. I've had it on my playlist for a while now, actually, because of this film. And like I said, we get some incredible sequences in here. The tone becomes a lot more horror-esque at times. I think the whole film was quite more Cronenberg than it is Lynch. I think the narrative is quite a Cronenberg style film, and we get this kind of robotic doll that's just sitting there. The flood, the natural disasters is an earthquake in this one. That's what they're kind of leading us to believe. Like, oh, is this the beast? But no, it isn't. And then for me, the scariest scene, I absolutely hate it every time I watch it, is the woman she keeps on video calling, and it is the shot is so perfectly framed. You just have her who looks so creepy, and my eyes are just into that, staring at that red space behind her. I'm just waiting for something and it's absolutely terrifying. I'm just waiting for something to happen in that red space every single time she comes on. And I think the moment that I became most scared of her, she was like, and she's talking to her, she's just like, all out of nowhere, she's like, "Oh, I don't want the person behind you to hear." And I just absolutely lost at that moment. And then it just cuts back to her, and she's just like weirdly walking off out of there. But yeah, that kind of, I think that whole sequence is absolutely brilliant.
Okay, I love this section. Yeah, this is exactly like what you said, Oscar. That's like at a point where I was like a bit lost in the film as soon as it went to LA. I love when people use LA as like a character in its own. Of course, that's where a lot of the Lynch influences here come in, with like Mulholland Drive influences using LA. It's also got a very digital feel, like I was saying, to Twin Peaks: The Return, particularly the scenes where she's like coming in and out of the nightclub. I also notice a lot of De Palma in here, particularly. Like you said, it almost becomes a horror film. It's like a slasher almost, when like it sets up like the very like scenario of like the girl being alone in her apartment, and then like it always feels like she's being watched somewhere by the Louis character. A lot of voyeurism. It reminded me of you've both seen De Palma's Body Double, when he's watching, and it's almost like Rear Window, where he's watching the LA apartment. From like the different floors and all the windows. It constantly feels like that, and you get that wide shot of it like that when it's showing all the windows and just how alone she is in that building.
The like owner of the house is constantly calling to make sure things are okay. So it's like there's also this thing where it's like, yeah, she's really being watched. So it's like, oh, the neighbors thought this, and the neighbors saw this. It's like, yeah,
there's alarms going off, and she has no idea what's going on.
Yeah. And then he calls up after the earthquake. She's like, "Oh yeah, this vase broke," and she lies and just goes and knocks it over and breaks it.
Yeah, There's a lot of different. I feel like the filmmaking kind of adjusts to being more of a modern film in this, because like the first half was a bit more of the traditional like period piece, and this one has like a lot of technology in it. It uses split screens, uses the TV in the kind of like 4 sections of CCTV. A lot of interesting visual storytelling, which reminded me a lot of De Palma, who, like Lynch, did go to like the digital route towards with his later work. And this section really reminded me of his film Passion. I think it was in 2012 that came out. But it's more of the kind of like psychosexual thriller that has scenes similar to the last section in the house in this. So yeah, 2 filmmakers that I loved. So I instantly was like locked in for this section, and it really brought me back to loving the film. Yeah, just so many cool parts with the laptop screens and stuff, like you were saying when she's talking to the medium. Weirdly more technological than like the futuristic parts where like all the rooms and stuff are empty. I thought that was a like kind of weird aspect to it. But yeah, the 2 characters in LA are they're 2 different kind of different personalities in time, or however you would explain it. The incel is so funny, but like it's like 2 very different sides of like the human experience in LA. I think he's trying to show, because it's like him being the incel and the vlogging his problems with modern society and the lack of attention and going to beaches and getting mad at couples, like you're saying. He's someone that's really like socially isolated, sort of like they are in the future, because they basically have like no human interaction from what we see, apart from a few moments. And then Gabrielle is like an aspiring actress in LA, and she has like the pressures of like surgery and beauty and all that comes with that. Like there's scenes wherein she's walking around closing all the apartment doors and stuff, and she's on like the phone to like a surgery place, and they're just endlessly like naming surgeries that she can get. So yeah, I thought that was really an interesting aspect to kind of the different kind of characters as well. But yeah, this section just completely brought me back into the film. I loved it.
Yeah, his character's so funny because we kind of get the scene with the earthquake and they meet outside, and Gabrielle like treats him like a child. He's like, "Oh, you've done the hardest thing already. Oh, you're so good for coming in." And they have like the most awkward kiss ever. It's absolutely hilarious. And then obviously they start making out, and then there's a moment before in the Paris section, and that lady that she initially talked to about the pigeon, she says something about like closing her eyes, because that's it. We there's like this Paris section, and it's like a glimpse to the house scene before, and the camera's just like gliding around the house, and she's just explaining things. This is in the Paris section, and then it goes over to them making out on the sofa, and there's like when you open your eyes, everything will like change or something. And then when it actually gets to that bit, when she like opens her eyes, like there's a completely different man that she's making out with, and he's just sat in his car. There's just like, oh, this woman wanted to bring me into this house, but all she was going to do is going to embarrass me. And it's so funny. And he's like, and he talks about the earthquake, like the natural disasters that's been happening. It's like, oh, he thought it was brilliant, and he hopes it lasts all night. As in, he just wants this kind of this peril and all this kind of chaos, all the bad things to just continue and hurt her. I think, what does he say near the end? You have deprived me of my happy life, so I'll deprive you of one. And just further foreshadowing just the ending of this film. And maybe that's just what it was all along, and he thought he was being mistreated, so he's gonna purify himself. And it's an absolutely crazy section. But yeah, and and then when we are moving to the kind of that final bit of that section between those two, when it becomes this slasher, we briefly see a shadow, like a split-second shadow of a monster on a wall, and this section is beyond that. So the film just pauses and lags. And it's brilliant. And then we kind of get the repeated door opening, like George Mick opens like the door 3 times, and that section, every time it happens, I'm like scared that something different's going to happen.
I thought the
And
screen had
it's,
just broke when I watched that in theaters. When it just freezes for like a good like 5 seconds.
um,
Also, like
it's
when the earthquake first hits, the screen like starts wobbling and
Mhm.
bubbling almost. That's really cool. I like that. I didn't expect that. Yeah, George McKay's character is so interesting, like because you almost feel like he wants to keep living the way he is because he's so like sold on himself and that's just his life. So even when after the earthquake, Leah Seydoux talking to him and she's like, "Can you walk me back to my house?" And he's like, "No, because I'm scared that I do something bad." He says something like that. Like he immediately at the face of like trying like something that could be a new experience for him is like, "No, fuck that. Like I'm too sold like on myself and like this life because it's safe and I know what it's like." And I think that kind of reflects his choice at the end where he's leading into that life of safety where he doesn't have to answer the tough questions, doesn't have to experience like intense moments. I think that's so interesting is like I was sitting on the couch with my girlfriend rewatching the 2014 segment and yeah, it's fucking hilarious. Like she was just listening, she was painting and she's like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, sorry." But yeah, I think that it's an interesting way to portray that kind of emotion of like somebody who feels so isolated but also like kind of just wants to be in their own little world and with the I don't remember, they say a certain percentage have done the purification.
0.7 is the failure. 0.7, I think it
Yeah.
is. Wait, is that what you were talking about? The
Oh no, I think
failure?
I was talking about the they're like when they're first talking about it at the beginning. I think I was talking about where
Oh.
she says like 62% of jobs have been taken over by AI, but like um he just kind of wants to fit in but also
Hmm.
take the easiest path to fitting in. So yeah, I think that whole incel thing, like it definitely is foreshadowing that choice at the end.
Mm.
Um
Yeah, he says like fulfillment lies in the lack of passion or something. He says when they're talking about the like whether to do the program. So yeah, it ties into like that kind of like idea of them just like doing nothing and the AI taking over.
yeah, there's a I don't remember what the exact quote is, but something along the lines of the most destructive thing is non-choice. And
Mm.
that's like Leia Seydoux is in this space of like not making a direct choice. She's just trying to, well, she makes the choice to like just see what's inside of herself. But um there's another line in the Paris bit where she's talking about whether I think it's in the Paris bit where she's talking about she's scared to continue into the past because it'll spoil the present. And I think that's really interesting where it's like and it is true for these all these people who have done it because it's spoiling the present of like that's just your life is gone. The human life is gone.
Yeah, and he keeps repeating, "I only have sex when I'm asleep, not in real life."
Yeah. Yeah, and
And like they really emphasize that. So it's like when like in that world, like they only really live when they like go back in time and like these like weird pod things.
yeah, I love the shot where I think it's right before I can't remember exactly where it is, but it's this like circular pan around the house, the mansion, and there's the quote that you said, Ryan, where they're like he only makes love in his dreams.
Hmm.
And then there's like and you will find a knife on the table and it's like this really intense, the score is really haunting. I love that shot and that whole scene. It's quite a long take and it just keeps you in that it like echoes that feeling from the start where it's just you something's wrong and you don't really know what. And at the start of a new section you're like, okay, well, where's this gonna go? And it continued the like plot but in a completely different feeling. It's a lot less two people asking each other questions and more just watching characters make their own decisions. I thought it was so interesting. Yeah.
I think that there's some interesting things because I picked up on this rewatch. There's a scene where she searches his name and her name into Google. When she searches his name up, he comes up loads, and then when she searches herself up, nothing comes up, nothing at all, and she just it's kind of jealousy, but not in a not in that kind of way. And I think the I only have sex in my dreams is a really interesting kind of thing because she is longing to find, that's almost where she wants to end up. And even though it's talking about his character, I think there's so much kind of longing in his character that she wants, and that he represents the kind of emotions within her. And the only place that we ever see that happen for her is in a fake reality, is technically in her dreams. But I think the most interesting thing that I haven't really seen picked up on is the three girls that are in the club in the 2014 LA section, and they're in it in one of the ones that in reality. I think
it's the 60s.
The 60s. And when I rewatched it, I could only think of like Greek mythology, you get like the three witches. I know this is such a reach, but like they represent fate and like human destiny, and I think that's so brilliant because she kind of is longing for them because she doesn't want to be alone, and that's all she says, and she just gets rejected from them every time, and they just pass her on. And there's the time it happens in reality, she gets refused, and it instantly just cuts to her going back into her dream world, her fake reality. And I think that's just such a brilliant edit point of her just being rejected again from having connections, and then she's like, oh, I instantly want to be back in my fake reality where I maybe have some chance of getting connections back again. Obviously she kind of ends up in this place where she's one of the only very, very few failures of the purification process, but maybe that was kind of doomed from the start, like all of this was.
Yeah,
it's interesting as well how she still was drawn to watch to him, even though he's like this weird psychopath incel. And again, she dies. He just ends up killing her in the pool, kind of like the first one.
Yeah, both end in water.
mm-hmm.
Both but only she dies in this one.
It also almost starts with water for her character too. Like it cuts from the drowning to, I think it's after they cut from her eyes. It cuts to her diving into the pool.
Yeah.
I love this one quote where it's her and George McKay talking in present day. I'm pretty sure it's present day, but it's like, oh, did you go through it? And she's like, she mentions, I hate that they call it purification because that implies that I'm impure. And it's just such a interesting idea to think about how society got to that point where they just decided that the human nature is just impure itself, and just telling the world, and they're like, okay, yeah, they're like, trust me, it'll be easier this way. It's crazy.
One, I think you mentioned earlier, Evan, about her crying to the songs. And I think this film, like I've mentioned with the kind of music choices, there's such a connection to her relationship to music in this film. And she just says, I don't know why I cry so much. And she's at this point, she's almost rejecting her emotions, and that she wants to be purified at this point for some reason. Whenever she gets emotional, it's like she doesn't want to be that way. And every time, I think it's Evergreen, I think the song is, we get that really weird section on the laptop, like when she's trying to search up things and they don't exist, and it comes up with these really weird videos of like these weird people. And then she gets like spammed with loads of virus things. But yeah, did anyone have anything else to add about 2014 before we dive into the whole day?
The one thing that like kind of, I mean, it might be reaching, but seeing her, like, it's not just the karaoke stuff that on TV that gets her, but like that type of music seems very human and like communal and people having fun. And that's like just echoing back to her, like being such a emotional person, where seeing not only like obviously music itself can draw an emotion, but seeing people do it together, even if they're not the best singer, things like that. I kind of like that they use that as a way to show her being so impacted by the music.
That Evergreen song, I don't know if it's just me, but that sounds like Blue Velvet, doesn't it? Kind of like Trinick.
Yeah, I think those kind of music, and I guess also it's suburban LA as well. It's just like every time I see a film like this set in the suburbs, it's just got Lynch written all over it.
I've just got one more thing about that, and it's about the credits, really. So it's after this section, but it's weird. Like they don't have any credits. It's a QR code that comes up on the screen,
QR code.
and then it's just like no
So
noise.
good.
And did any of you scan the QR code?
No.
No, so it's like 8 minutes of credits, but there's a post-credit scene
What the fuck?
where the medium is like trying to call out to telling her not to go into like the DNA purification room, and then like the screen goes black and you just hear a gunshot, and it's like as if they've like killed her to like stop her from like ratting out in the process or whatever. It's weird.
Oh my God.
Wait, what? Wait, is this from the QR code?
Yeah, so the QR code sends you to like an 8-minute video of all the credits.
Oh my God. I might
It's
pull that up
crazy.
now. I did not realize that's crazy.
Yeah.
The QR code is so brilliant and so inhumane a way of doing that. But I guess going back to kind of all the 2044 sections, I think it's so brilliant how they're just kind of the production of it all, how so minimalist the whole futuristic idea is. You know, obviously the masks, I think, just really neat little design. Just kind of the bridges they're walking across and kind of the environments, the contrast between the kind of older areas, but somehow it looks believably futuristic. There's hardly the streets are so barren and empty. There's deer and wolves walking the streets. Multiple kind of animalistic imagery throughout this film. And yeah, so it's kind of set about this kind of purification process which she moves in and out of. Like you've mentioned, there's kind of reflective periods where she kind of sees images on this big screen. Just after she gets shot in 2014, we get this like little rewind thing of her looking back over the events of kind of what's just happened. But I was confused because in the beginning. Did the man like describe as something like happens in like a split second, or am I being stupid? He kind of says, "Oh, it'll just be like closing your eyes and then opening them like that." Is that right? Is it like?
Yeah.
Because there's a sequence where when she's making out with Louis, it cuts back to her and she's like moving around in real time, and it's not like it kind of breaks the illusion that it's not just some split second thing. It's actually longer than that, because she's just there for a few seconds, like moving in kind of like the black mold or whatever in the suit that she's in. But no,
the black goo that the Harkonnens used to heal themselves in Dune.
I think there's like a little quote after that scene, Oscar, where it's like, how long did it take? And she says like, oh, like 10 minutes or something like that. And just like, oh, do you remember it all? So yeah, but there's definitely at the beginning, she's so stressed out about it. And it's like, close your eyes. And she's like initially hesitant to do it, but she does it. And then he's like, I don't know, 5 seconds later, open them, and he's like, that's what it is. Also, I hate the shot, like just the idea of a needle straight in the ear.
Yeah,
Creepy,
that is crazy. But I think there's some conversations about religion and not feeling anything. There's some like she says, I don't want to become a Buddhist or a robot. This just inhumane feeling of nothing. And I think there's some discourse about AI becoming fair and responsible, which I think is hilarious. And also the clubs that are in the 2044 sections are all kind of different dates. I can't remember the date of all of them. All I know is it ends in 1963. And I was trying to find, is there anything like significant about 1963?
Yeah, I was trying to think as well. It's because it's a 72, 63 and 80, I think. But yeah, I can think of ways to like kind of link what it was.
Yeah, but he was 68, not 63.
Yeah.
When we get that weird scene when she's on the phone with her friend and she just like the friend just strangles and breaks a cat's neck.
Mm-hmm. I thought it was an AI at first that she was talking to, and then but it's like an actual person just stuck in their house. It's weird.
And the ending, of course, is just, I think, is one of the most emotionally draining and horrifying endings ever. It's just so sad. This kind of dooming realization comes forefront, and the man that she was hoping to find some form of love and connection with has purified himself, and now she's just left to love nobody. Because I think the film kind of focuses on the fact that this man is the only person that she can fall in love with and that she wants an emotional connection with, and that is just taken away. I like how kind of singular that vision is, that it's just focused on him rather than anybody else. And yeah, anybody else that she really interacts with this film has just kind of pushed her away. And yeah, I think the club scenes are really great, and it is, they mentioned that the 1963 in the last scene how empty it is. They say it's like, why is it so empty here? And it's interesting, but yeah, it's brilliant. Oh, and the other thing, the fade between at the end of 2014, we see these kind of like pixelated fades, and the screen goes all like mush and weird. It fades just as they kiss in 2014, and she kills her, and he kills her. Sorry, which I also think is a nice little thing. Is like just as they're finding this connection, bam, dead. But yeah. It's such a emotionally horrifying ending, and the pigeon flies away at the end of it.
Yeah, I think the like build up to that ending is so heartbreaking, especially because you have this like really intimate scene between Gabrielle and Kelly, and I find it really interesting that they kiss each other in that scene, and it's like, you know, I almost felt for a moment that like Kelly was playing at this. She's there to make sure everything goes okay, right? And it's like, here, you can still experience intimacy with an AI robot, like, but she asks to like set up this meeting at the bar with George McKay, and she's, you know, rubbing her hands, and she looks like kind of, it's like that pre-first date type feeling where she's like excited to see him again. And he brings up that he finished Madame Butterfly, which she had asked him. I think that's in the Paris section. She talks about that, I think. But
yeah, it's towards the start when they meet. Yeah. Well, she's walking out her first appointment with the thing. That interview thing.
So I just like, it's just this double punch where, you know, he connects, and it's like, yeah, here's some human connection. You know, I took an interest in something you told me about, even though I've got nothing left. And she's so excited, and then it's just, during the purification ritual, they showed it to me, and it's like, oh fuck. It's this back and forth scene. it's just horrifying. The scream is terrible, like terrifying, ear piercing. The look in her eyes, the tears. Oh, it's absolutely gut wrenching.
The lighting on her like face and the eyes, just the tears look is really unbelievable, and the way it just stands out. But I think that opera scene that you were talking about in that kind of first thing is described as a drama of endless loss, and that is just so reflective of like almost like slightly meta on the message of the entire film. And I can't remember what the opera was at the beginning, but yeah, and I also think it's interesting how she's like the she does like the doll creating in the 1910s, doesn't she?
Her husband owns the factory.
I think it's interesting how they kind of pinned her as like her husband as like responsible for this situation almost that they're in, and it's her loved one at the time is almost responsible for her kind of situation at the end of the film, because the dolls are kind of they're kind of, well, I guess the AI of the whole film, even though there are kind of humans there, but you can't really tell the difference between the androids and the purified humans. But yeah, it's so tragic how almost obvious the ending is on not obvious, but there's so many just hints to it throughout the film about how just this impending sense of doom. I saw an interesting quote on Twitter a few weeks back. It's like, one man's predictability is another man's impending doom, and I think that's is brilliant and really works well for this film. But yeah, it's one of my favorite endings of the decade. It's one of my favorite films of the decade in general, and I think I have this at like my number. I think it's second favorite film of the year.
Yeah, the ending is so haunting. Is going back to the credits as well, because of the fact that they just don't even have any credits, and it just almost goes to a black screen and there's no noise. It really digs that like very dreary ending into it. There's no kind of light off with the credits and like a music or something. And I think she asks like her like AI robot friend to like dance, and that's where she takes her. It's like this, and she describes it as like a free zone, where people, it feels like that's like the only place where people can really show emotion. It's like when they can like dance and like pretend it's the past, where they were able to like be happy, kind of reliving the past like they do in the surgery. Is it implied that all those people have like already had the surgery, or like do you think it's just a mix?
Good question. It's like when she's at the club most of the time, she is not really dancing. But as she goes to more clubs and the film progresses, she starts to like really get into the dancing.
Yeah, that's an interesting point as well, because she goes to the nightclub in 2014 as well. There's a connection there between the two. Yeah, the nightclubs were just like, there was, like you were saying, they looked great. There was actually color in them, so there was huge contrast just to really the rest of the film. Obviously, that's where a lot of the Cronenberg like kind of stuff influences come from. I feel like that was also kind of like a Matrix, which was like hooking up, like you were saying, how she was like, it wasn't a split second, like she was still interacting with it outside of the dream. It was like when they hooked up to like the mainstream of the Matrix, and like their bodies were just like intact and like in the other world. That's what it really reminded me of.
Yeah, I think the 2044 scenes, like when she's being questioned, and the way they're filmed are so interesting, because it's always like kind of off to the side, maybe like the way the camera's positioned, but there's a lot of shots where it won't be straight up of her face. It'll be her face blown up onto this huge screen, and you watch it through that perspective, and it's like, what is on the other side of this? Like, are they showing this to people? Like, is this some way, there's all this AI analyzing failures so that they can like get it even better? It's such a scary situation, and I love Gabrielle's just like constant, even though it's so painful to like dive into your own emotions even when you can't understand them at all. It feels like a therapy session, this movie. It's like she just feels this constant need to like uncover it, and it's why am I crying at music? It's why am she has this quote really at the start of the movie, and she says, I've spent my whole life thinking of terrible things. And like, you can tell that she wants to be free of it, of the haunting, the beast, be free of it. But she's able to challenge it and not just immediately like give in to the purification. It's such an interesting look at human emotion and the way people deal with it. And I think having this pretty realistic ending where like, shit's doomed and it's not this storybook ending. It's like, it was doomed from the start, and they tell you that every single time, and you still, you kind of expect it, but it still hits so hard, and it's such an unbelievably depressing ending. But they told you exactly what was going to happen. I think it's utterly brilliant, and yeah, it just gets better on rewatch. I bought it immediately, so I could see myself rewatching this like a lot. I wrote this in my notes at one point. I don't know if I still think it, but it kind of gave me like Uncle Boomy vibes at some points, where it's like this real surrealist look at your past lives, where when I went into that movie, I had expected like this is what I expected from that movie, and not the catfish shit and stuff like that. But I think that idea as a whole is just, there's a lot of avenues to go, and they should do it more often. It asks a lot of interesting questions about human nature, and that's stuff that just really interests me.
And I think it's only going to age better as more rewatches, more time passes.
Yeah.
It's I love these kind of really relevant films. They're like relevant, obviously, when they're released, but just as time goes by, just things are happening, and just the increase of relevance. The zone of interest is exactly the same with what's happening as well. That film has become so relevant, even as more relevant it was at that time. And this is only getting just aged the exact same way. And yeah, it's really, really fascinating.
Any last thoughts on The Beast?
Yeah. If you're in the US, I'm pretty sure it's on the Criterion channel. It's getting a physical release soon. It's on Mubi over here, and I'm pretty sure it's on Mubi in other places as well. And it's out on physical here in the UK. So yeah, go and watch it. It's a fantastic film.
Yeah. Amazing movie.
Another great French-Canadian film, which we also reviewed, Red Rooms, which will be on Evan's podcast sometimes this week, I think.
Yeah, it'll probably be today or tomorrow.
Yeah, so we'll leave a link to that in the comments. Go and check that out. Another great film from this year that nobody's really talking about, from Canada and France. Is he French-Canadian, or is he just a French person that lives in Canada?
Who, Benello?
Yeah.
Pretty sure it's just French.
Yeah. I think he does live in Canada.
I did not know that The Beast was French-Canadian. I thought it was just French.
Is it French-Canadian?
He lives in Canada, and some of it was shot in Canada, I think.
It is. To be fair, yeah, on the countries of like the like production, I guess it's Canadian, French, and Swiss.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Hell yeah.
Neither picked it up for their best international pick, though. If it would qualify, I don't know if it has enough French in it to even count as an international film, maybe. But yeah,
this film got rejected in Cannes.
That's crazy.
And then Venice picked it up last year.
Damn.
Crazy.
Okay, let us know in the comments what you thought of this, if you watched it. Hopefully you didn't watch this podcast without watching it, but yeah. Yeah, let us know in the comments what you thought about it, and see you next week for something else.